Hello, welcome back to Book and Page, and we are actually on chapter 6 of The Hobbit, Out of the Frying Pan and Into the Fire. I'm sure we've all been in positions where that is the saying that came to mind. Yay. Okay. Quick summary. Bilbo is now outside, and in realizing that he's on the other side of the mountain, and finding the dwarves, he sneaks up on them, and it turns out they're arguing against Gandalf going back in to get him. Yay. Thanks, friends. So Bilbo reveals himself, everybody gets each other caught up, but Bilbo does not mention the magical ring that he found that makes him invisible. As they head off, they're off and they slide down part of the mountain and hit a tree line, and they're heading along that, and whoops, wouldn't you know, there's a whole lot of wolves. So up some trees they all go, except for Bilbo, who is too short and yet again forgotten, until Dory gets down and literally gives him a boost up into the tree. They barely get into the tree when the wolves show up. Or the wargs. They're called the wargs. They're a species of wolf, evidently. And we don't get much description beyond that about physically what they look like. So whether or not they're bigger, broodier wolves that are big enough for orcs to ride. I think we eventually get to the point where orcs are riding wargs, so it would make sense. So the wargs are there and find Bilbo and Dory heading up a tree. So they say, I wonder if there's anybody else. Find the trees they're in and post guards on the trees. And then they have a nice little meeting about why the goblins are late for the raid they're all supposed to go on. Which Gandalf understands, and Gandalf gets really nervous and starts throwing burning pine cones at them. Until most of the wargs run off, except for the ones guarding the tree. And then we find out that there are eagles in the area, big gigantic eagles, and the Lord of Eagles, which is good because the goblins have now shown up, and along with another song proceed to really start setting the trees on fire, because goblins are not afraid of fire like the wargs are. So, whoops, Gandalf, you've set our trees on fire, but it's okay because the eagles have shown up, pull everybody out of the tree, except yet again Bilbo, who only saves himself by grabbing hold of Dory. Poor Bilbo, just no love for Bilbo today, apparently. And off they head to the Eagle's Eyrie, where they take them in for the night, give them some food, and make the plan to take them a little further, but they certainly won't go far enough that they're actually over where men live, because men will shoot them with bows. So if you're wondering why, with Eagles Ex Machina showing up at the end of everything, constantly everywhere, that the eagles will not fly over to the Lonely Mountain for them right now, is because men are going to shoot them. It is only after this point, when they get involved in the Battle of the Five Armies, does it turn out that Gandalf and people tell people to stop shooting the gigantic eagles, which allows them to come in and help save Frodo and Sam at Mordor. Yep, so that's why they won't go any further. They don't want to get shot. Okay, so that's an interesting chapter, which involves two groups that we get a lot more personal with, but are reappearing throughout Tolkien's work. The wargs, notably on the side of the bad guys, and the eagles on the side of the good guys. But before we get to them, let's take a step back. We gotta talk about these dwarves. So, Bilbo gets to the other side of the mountain, and he realizes the sun's setting behind the mountain. So he's just like, oh, I'm on the other side of the mountain. I got no dwarves, and I got no wizard. And Bilbo, who doesn't fight anything and just went through a horrific and probably semi-traumatizing riddle game with a guy that wanted to eat him, makes the decision that he now has to go back into the mountain to try and find the dwarves and Gandalf. Yes, because Bilbo could do a lot against all of those goblins that he just got past. But he does have an invisible ring, and what he notes is it's his duty to go back. They are traveling companions, so if he can save them, he certainly needs to try. Thankfully, he doesn't have to, because he's quite miserable with that decision, though he's willing to do it anyways. Turns out the dwarves are just over there. So Bilbo, with the ring still on, goes off to visit and find the dwarves, and wouldn't you know it, none of them want to go back into the mountain to save him. Despite that there are 13 dwarves and a wizard, and literally only Gandalf is willing to go back into the mountain to save Bilbo. Wow. Wow. That is a punch to the gut for Bilbo there. But he doesn't really acknowledge it as that. But the fact that he just made the decision that he is a single person, needs to go back in to see if he can help these people. The fact that the group of them who would stand a far better chance of saving one person rather than one person saving 13 dwarves, they're not willing to. That's actually kind of terrible. And Gandalf is exactly thinking the exact same way as Bilbo is at this point in time, which is, he's my responsibility. I brought him along. It is my duty to go in there and get him. He is my friend. So what's up, dwarves? Just Bilbo's not your friend? Like, and that's literally it. The entire time they're arguing about how useless he's been and how he didn't have enough sense to follow them. Why would you assume he just chose not to follow you? Why would you not assume that in the attack that you were fending off, something happened which meant he physically could not follow you? Because that's what they argue. You should have had more sense. Boy, no. 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 Because in this moment, we're actually having this argument about if he's not worth something to us, if he's not useful to us, we're not going to bother. And that's a terrible way to ever consider whether or not you should help somebody. You should not make that decision based on how useful that person is to you. Like, people have an inherent worth which makes them worth saving. And that's how Gandalf and Bilbo are seeing it. These people have an inherent worth, especially since we're traveling together. I need to do what I can. And the dwarves are seeing that differently. And again, maybe this comes back to that notable divide of what's important in the world. Because the hobbits like comfort, but they're also very family-oriented. Even Bilbo, who lives alone, again, has many pegs because he's used to having many visitors. He's a social creature. And that social aspect, that friendship with other beings is inherently worth something, and it's worth sacrificing yourself if you can help them. Even if you only share the simple things, if you only share quietly sitting, reading, or share a meal together, that person is still worth something and worth protecting as a person, not because they're useful to you. But again, the dwarves have a much more materialistic view of things. So worth becomes something to actually judge people by. And as depressing as that is, it becomes key for the big mistakes that they make at the end of this novel, and in fact the big realization that Thorn has at the end of this novel. Because despite having said a couple of times in this book that these dwarves are the good type of dwarves, they're certainly not without their flaws, and in fact Tolkien doesn't make the turnaround at the mountain like that. He's putting hints in far in advance that gold and jewels are going to come first. Worth and value is going to come first before lives. And you see it right here with, well, he should have had more sense to follow us. He should have been more useful. And now we're the ones that are inconvenienced because he's dead. The mountain and the love of gold and jewels that shows up there, while maybe worsened, is not out of nowhere. We're already seeing it here. And it's a major red flag. Yeah, so I'm not a fan of dwarves right now. For, I think, understandable reasons. Because, I mean, literally Bilbo by himself decides he needs to march back into that mountain and try and find the people he's traveling with. And 13 dwarves won't do the same for him. Okay. Who? Be Bilbo. Be Bilbo over the dwarves in a situation like this. Help other people because they're people and not because they're worth something or useful to you. Well, they're worth something because they're people, not because you're going to gain something from it in a material sense. People are worth something. Yeah, okay. People are worth something inherently because they are people. Not because they're useful. There. Yeah, okay. Stepping away from the dwarves, let's talk about the nature of animals in this text. So we've already had this realization that nature is terrifying and will destroy you in an amoral sense. And Tolkien's now moving up from that, and he's added animals into the mix. We get two groups in this chapter, which would be the wargs, who are wolves, and the northern eagles, who are eagles. And Tolkien actually gives them not just independent groups that function with their own hierarchies and their own languages, which are both distinctly noted as being these independent groups with leaders and relationships and goals and needs. But they also have this sort of weird moral compass thing that's actually going on. Wargs are actually noted to be evil wolves. And he uses the word evil there. There's a difference between a normal wolf and an evil warg. And the eagles are in fact noted to be unkind birds who can be cowardly and cruel. But these are the northern type who are really noble. They're strong, proud, and noble-hearted. So we're sort of on the different spectrums where usually we, again, try and put animals either into the neutral term or the amoral term. Sharks don't attack people because they're vicious. Sharks attack people, particularly surfers, because they have the unfortunate silhouette of looking like a seal. So, yeah, animal on animal attacks are even more neutral than that. Orca eating a seal is because the orca eats seals. It's not because the orca is crazed or something. But we also start realizing there's a little more to that. The orca example, for example, there have been accounts of orcas that, in not being treated well, became man killers. Camels are actually very well known for having good memories, and you need to treat your camel right, or the camel will look for an opportunity to kill you. So we start having this amoral, moral sense to it, which is a contradiction, because they're not going from our morals about killing being wrong. They're going from their own sense of, I'm in pain and I need it to stop. A cornered animal is very dangerous, not because it decides to be dangerous, but because it's trying to protect itself. But here it's sort of deepened a little bit. We're getting a bit more of the human moral compass thrown in here, with words such as unkind and evil being thrown about, and noble on the side of the eagles. So Tolkien's really trying to give the animals here just as much agency, because it's important that we do that we recognize that it's not just humanoid races in the area, but also animal races that are trying to make their way in the world. And some of them, like the wargs, have found the easiest way to make their way in the world is to work with creatures such as the goblins. Partially because even the non-evil wolves are still known to be aggressive breeds that humanoid groups probably don't want around and are willing to hunt and defend themselves against. So when it comes to wargs, well, it's probably a lot easier to just go with the group that's willing to use you for your violence rather than kill you for it. Same with exactly the eagles, making the decision that they won't fly anywhere closer to men, because men will react like they're being violent, even if the eagles are not doing anything. The men will still shoot them down with the assumption that they're going to be violent against their sheep and steal their sheep. So the animals here are still placing themselves in accordance to the humanoid races and trying to sort of carve out their own space in relation to those races. And it gives you a big sense that maybe we need to stop beating up on the animals so much. Maybe if we welcomed the eagles a little more, we'd gain a good ally. And if we stopped beating up on the wolves so much and recognized that being carnivores in their nature and not something they can necessarily help, then maybe we don't breed wargs to the point that we've got wargs that are talking with the goblins and setting up raids. It's just a thought. It's just a thought. Especially, again, one of the big problems with continuing development of human spaces is that it is encroaching on natural spaces for animals. So there's a lot more things such as coyotes just tramping through the city, along with raccoons, different birds that perch in the area and things like that are moving into human urban spaces simply because they have no other option. And unfortunately, the animals then become more dangerous and are therefore more likely to get hunted. Well, if we respect their space, then they might be more willing to respect ours. So, yeah, I think Tolkien's adding a bit of a warning here by giving these two groups a little more palpable a palpable nature that we can better understand, even if it's still a little foreign to us. And then saying, hey, maybe if we just left them alone, we could work together better, instead of the goblins and the wargs working together. And I almost said setting things on fire, but that's partially Gandalf's fault. Which is interesting, because why can the animal groups work together when the dwarves aren't even willing to go back for Bilbo? At least the eagles were willing to go back for Bilbo at the Eyrie. No easy answers, huh? just how we have to deal with it. So I'm going to keep reading, and I hope you do too. See you next time.